Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Poisoner's Almanac. I am your co-host, Adam.
Yo. How's it going?
Going good.
I sound a little rough because I've been sick all week
You have been sick.
with the COVIDs.
You got the black lung, Pop.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because we're going to be talking about some mining stuff today.
Get out of here. I didn't even know that.
Maybe not black lung, but no.
Okay. Well, else. You know, you're actually really good looking.
Oh, don't say that right now. I feel ick.
You know, just felt like the time to...
I sound worse, though, than I feel. So...
Yeah.
Anyone, I just might sound a little funny on this podcast today, but
okay.
I did some research this week. I didn't let it keep me down.
Look at you.
I got some stuff done, and we're gonna make this episode a good one.
Sticking it to the man.
To the virus.
To the virus, right? So, welcome back, everybody. Wonderful to have you. Let's jump into our housekeeping segment quickly. Make sure that you follow the podcast on whatever platform that you're listening on. We really appreciate that. Also, make sure to follow us on socials. We have links in the show notes where you can follow us. Specifically, follow the podcast Instagram, Poisoners_Almanac. Becca runs that account personally.
Also, that's me. I didn't mention my name earlier, but that's me.
Yes, this is Rebecca, my wife.
Hi. I'm here.
If it's your first time, her name's Rebecca. But you guys can send us questions or content suggestions through the podcast Instagram, whether it's a comment or a direct message. You had a couple of things you wanted to mention from the Instagram, right?
Oh, yeah. I got somebody sent me a message about the whole...
I'm so sorry. I jumped the gun. I haven't finished housekeeping. I'm so sorry.
Oh, my God.
Sorry. Okay. We'll get right to that as soon as I'm done. We want to thank you in advance. And as a result of you all leaving so many 5-star reviews, I've seen a ton of them on Spotify. Thank you so much for that. That functions like a tip jar, and it pushes the podcast further into the algorithms of these platforms to get to the listeners like y'all that really enjoy this podcast. So thank you for that. There is a Patreon coming soon. We'll still have listener support up and running on the Spotify, but that is only available to US-based listeners. Patreon, however, can be accessed internationally. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be announcing that soon. Also, listener support shout out to Delshawn Harris, Taylor McCaleb, and Carl Ziegler Jr. Thank you guys so much for your monthly financial support of the podcast. Any way you guys support the podcast helps us create more content and better content, if I do say so myself. And yeah, I think that about does it for housekeeping. So, my dear, why don't you jump into the chatter on the podcast Instagram, please?
Oh, you're done?
You're
done? Okay.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Actually, wait a minute. I'm just kidding.
Oh, my God. So, yeah, I got a message from one of our faithful followers about the whole Alicia Silverstone incident. You heard about that?
No.
She was walking. I think she was in the UK. She was...
As if.
I know. Yeah. She was walking down the street and just picked this thing she thought was a cherry tomato and started eating it, apparently, and was like, "What is this? I don't know what this is." You know, she put it on like social media, and she was like, you know, obviously the leaves look different.
Oh no.
Well, it looked like a cherry tomato because it is it is part of the nightshade family.
Oh no.
She's fine.
Okay, good.
She said she didn't swallow it from what I read, but and it's only mildly poisonous. It probably would have only made her sick. But yeah,
okay.
don't just go picking stuff you don't know what it is and put it in your mouth.
Ooh. She didn't attempt to ingest
very clueless thing to do. But which no hate to her. She's I've always been a fan of Alicia Silverstone stuff back in the day, But no, she's...
That's so scary.
Also, if you're gonna eat fruits and veg anywhere, make sure you wash your stuff too. I mean, just in case. Like something's been on it, I don't know. That's just me. It's just me. I mean, it shouldn't be just me. I think it's most people who wash their fruits and veggies.
It's a good idea. She has had some interesting takes in the past about, health and wellness situations.
Well, to each their own. I mean, she's, I think, I know, isn't she a vegetarian? Is she vegetarian or vegan? I don't know. It was something like that. But I think her she's has said some controversial things about parenting, but you know what? People can be really annoying with parenting, so I'm going to leave that alone. Because when I was pregnant, people were like, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, you should do that," and I can't stand it when people do that. So I'm not going to be one of those people.
There's a never-ending river of advice.
Yeah.
People touching your stomach.
Oh God.
You're like, you should introduce yourself first and then ask permission.
Maybe just don't approach me.
Or how about, can you just not?
That's weird. But also we had somebody, I think, commented on one of the previous podcast episodes about doing an episode on the Poisoner Squad, which is great because I've actually been reading that book a good bit. And so
brilliant.
Kind of read my mind a little bit.
They want us to cover that book.
We'll cover the topics within, I imagine, which include food adulteration and when regulations actually came into play for that and how difficult it was because a lot of
is that your stomach? I just heard
my stomach. I'm hungry because I woke up at 5:30 and I haven't eaten since then, and I think my body is recovering.
Okay.
And so it's like, feed me Seymour. Anyway, but yeah, so that's just kind of funny because I've been thinking about doing an episode on that, so that'll be coming soon too.
Cool
beans.
Sounds good. You guys make sure you send us talk it up on the podcast Instagram, if you will.
And hopefully I sound better next time, but hey, here we are. We're going to work with what we got.
Yes.
Okay. Today, I decided we were going to talk about asbestos.
All right.
Asbestos.
As best we can.
Yeah, there's that. So
pretty proud of that one, to be honest.
A little bit of history. Asbestos comes from the Greek word, and etymology, I suppose, comes from the Greek word amiantos, meaning undefiled. The Greek would also be the source of the Portuguese amianto and the French amiante. This is disputed by some, though, who say the word comes from the Greek word sasbestos, which means inextinguishable or unquenchable. So, it could be from either one of those words, I suppose.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a chemical name.
Well, no, it's actually a naturally occurring thing.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I thought it was synthetic. I thought.
No.
Oh.
Asbestos, which, asbestos is a naturally occurring fibrous silicate material that was known for its use in the late 19th century for fire-resistant coatings, concrete, bricks, pipes, fireplace cement, heat, fire, and acid-resistant gaskets, pipe insulation, ceiling insulation, fireproof drywall, flooring, roofing, lawn furniture, and drywall joint compound.
Ooh,
so a lot of stuff. It was also used in the auto industry. It's been used in clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's get into that. Now there are actually 6 types of asbestos. And I'm going to explain just briefly because I'm not going to go into too much detail because it is complex. There's, and I might say this wrong, chrysotile, which is white asbestos, and it's the most common type. It's used in floor tiles and fabrics. Amosite is brown asbestos used in building materials like insulation, cement, and roofing.
Mm-hmm.
Crocodilite. It sounds like crocodile, I know.
Oh, it does. Which
is also known as blue asbestos, and it's the most dangerous kind, used in insulation, tiles, and cement. Anthophyllite or anthophyllite. Anthophyllite. Whatever suits your fancy. It's the yellow gold version. It's yellow. It's like a goldish color. Mm-hmm. It's more rare and it's less commonly used. And there's tremolite, which often occurs with chrysotile. Now, actinolite is used in paint and drywall, insulation, and cement. So those are just the different types. All of them are harmful, to your health. Mm-hmm. But there are 2 different groups. There's the serpentine asbesto, which is the chrysotile, and it's made up of these curly fibers of and these groups of crystals. And then there's the amphibole asbestos, which is literally all the other ones that I mentioned. And they are more like these, they have more of these sharp needle-like fibers, that microscopically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you'll notice that fire resistant is a big part of its use in what I mentioned above or before
Sure.
I said all this. And that is because it has been known to resist fire very well for a very long time. It is also resistant to electricity and chemicals like acids. It has been recognized for these traits for more than 4,500 years throughout the world.
So what?
It was reportedly first discovered in a quarry in Greece.
What?
Yeah. So,
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know its history went back that far.
It's
That's
been
crazy.
around for a while. Before industrial uses in the 19th century, it was once spun into cloth for use as tablecloths, napkins, cloaks, handkerchiefs, and theater curtains. Because apparently, they had a problem with theater curtains lighting on fire.
Okay.
That would be disastrous. It was also found to be used in Finland around 2500 BC to strengthen clay pottery.
Wow.
So they found bits and pieces of it in pottery. Other early uses included lamp wicks, military garb, and funeral shrouds. Yeah. They would burn bodies inside these asbestos shrouds so that the body would burn to ash inside it without mixing with that of the wood and such. So the shroud would remain kind of intact and the body would be ash inside. Kind of morbid, but there you are.
That's got to be that had to feel like witchcraft back in that time.
Lamp wicks made using asbestos lasted longer, obviously, because of the heat resistance. And people like Marco Polo in around 1280 were writing about its qualities of fire resistance. And often there were these shows of lighting napkins made of asbestos on fire so that people could see it not burn and be amazed. Like, oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
That's so cool. This is before, Facebook and TikTok and all that.
Right.
So, gotta do something. Now, between 1660 and 1700, the Royal Society of England, which is the oldest national science institution, published history and information on asbestos, and it became even more widely used for coats, shirts, and other fashionable accessories like ruffles. I like your sleeves. Asbestos capes and gowns probably too, and gloves were used in shows because they could be lit on fire to amaze audiences.
Oh, it's like equipment for a stunt.
Yeah, but no thanks though, because
hard pass.
No fun. Not like we had a burn unit back then. I mean, I'm sure they had something they tried to use, but.
Speaking of, I watched a series on Apple TV. I forget the name. It was Will Ferrell and Paul Rudd. Will Ferrell played a textile business owner. Paul Rudd was a psychiatrist.
The psychiatrist.
Yeah. And he was a psychopath. The psychiatrist was. But Paul Rudd helped Will Ferrell, increase the amount of business he was doing. And one of the jobs they got was to coat. Sit your stomach. I can hear it loud and clear. I don't know if people can. But one of the jobs they got was to coat the curtains in a theater with fire-resistant material. They skimped on how far up the coating went on the curtains. They both went to a show in the theater after the install was done. The entire cast, like 100 people, comes on stage with candles.
Oh no.
And I'm telling you, I thought it was quite, it could have been a thing.
I remember going to, when we were still going to that church, they had a thing on Christmases where they do a candle lighting ceremony.
Yes.
That always made me so nervous because they would give them to kids to hold. I'm like, candles.
Yeah.
They're candles and they're being lit. And I'm like, what if somebody drops one? Or what if maybe I'm just more clumsy, but I'm imagining people just tripping. And
that's a real practical concern. I don't know how they ignored that.
That always made me nervous. Anyway, I don't maybe they got asbestos in there. I don't know. That would actually be very discouraging, but yeah. So there were also those who were selling fakes, of course. So that kind of sucks because if you get a fake and you're in one of these like shows, and like you light something on fire and like,
Oh
oh,
my
guess
God.
it's not resistant.
Whoops.
Kind of sucks.
Okay.
Now, in the early 1800s, a textile factory was made in Italy so that they could mass produce these things and more stuff like string and book covers using asbestos. Soon after this, insulation and fireproof paints were created using asbestos. Also, firefighters began to wear clothing made with asbestos because, you know, they're kind of
Wow.
in the thick of it.
I didn't know 90% of everything you've said already. This is wild.
Now, the mass production of fireproof building materials began in 1907 using asbestos. Of course, things declined around World War I and the Great Depression, but it rose again afterwards, you know, because of financial stuff. Asbestos cement pipes were made in 1929 for water and waste lines. The auto industry also used it around this time in the production of brakes, clutch components, and engine gaskets.
Yes, I did know that part. Okay.
The American military also had its uses for it. Also, shipbuilding accounted for a lot of exposure to asbestos.
I just realized there's a company that manufactured brake pads called Asbestos. I think it was based on that the name of asbestos. Wow. Okay.
I never know. America became the leading consumer of asbestos products by 1910, even more so by the 1950s and 60s, as the nation accounted for about 83% of consumption by then.
And in the 80s, we started consuming cocaine. I'm just kidding.
It was in 1918 that the Bureau of Labor Statistics released a warning of a risk of early death for those working with asbestos, but it was still considered a sort of magical mineral, so to speak, because it had so much, you know, it had so many uses. Kind of like we've seen with like lead and
Everything
radium.
we've covered.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, this thing is magic. It's from God.
magical.
It's amazing. It's a gift. And it turns out
I wash my hands with it.
Reminds me of like Boromir from Lord of the Rings, where he's like, it is a gift. Like,
it is a gift.
No. So,
why can we explain everything in life with the Council of Elrond?
It's just, you know, it helps with the horrors that seem to persist.
New season of The Rings of Power drops on the 29th. Pretty excited.
Yeah, so no one was really paying attention to the whole warning, you know. Now, production again declined during the Second World War, as things do, but greatly escalated afterwards, putting more workers at risk for the things that they were warning about and people weren't paying attention to. And you have to remember, too, that we didn't have, like, social media. There wasn't a lot of, like, there wasn't much ability to really get the news as quick or that kind of thing. So some people probably didn't even know about the warnings.
No.
Another decline in the production and use of asbestos came about in the 1970s when its effects became more widely known. Research during that time was able to find evidence that the breathing in of these sharp asbestos fibers was scarring and damaging the lungs irreversibly.
Yeah.
And a new medical condition called asbestosis was discovered in 1930 by a Dr. E.R.A. Meriwether. The first case officially was diagnosed in 1933.
33. So not until 40 years later was it like publicly acknowledged.
Well, there's this sort of latency period with asbestos. Like you won't really know that you've got a problem till about 20, maybe even 50 years later.
Wow.
So like you can be exposed to it, working around it, and not even notice that it's affecting you until years later.
I've had a handful of patients who had...
Kind of like radium.
Right.
For some.
I've had a handful of patients who... they had pulmonary fibrosis, but it was almost like what we call idiopathic. Like there's not really a clear reason for it, but they're older folks who, you know, and I'm like, you had to have been, it must have been a chemical exposure.
Or it could be, you know, or genetics. It just depends.
Yeah.
It depends. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised, though. This was not, however, the first time negative effects caused by asbestos had been written about. So we're going to take it back even further. Even as far back as 61 to 112 AD in Rome, it was observed by Pliny the Elder that slaves working in asbestos mines would become sick, and some would try to use like a thin portion of the bladder of a goat or a lamb as a sort of mask, because that's what they had back then. Okay.
Sorry. Her stomach is trying to exit her body.
I'm going to be editing this out anyway. It's fine.
Please don't.
I'm so hungry.
Okay.
I should order donuts for myself.
You should. Ooh,
It's
the
Friday.
inspiration.
You're the inspiration. Anyway, more recently connected to Dr. Meriwether's discovery of asbestosis were the increasing deaths in asbestos mining towns in the early 1900s, as well as findings of pulmonary scarring and traces of asbestos in a man who had died after working with asbestos for the previous 14 years. The first death, therefore, was documented in 1906 in England. I say documented because it probably wasn't the first one attributed to asbestos, certainly. Now, Lucy Stretfield, one of the UK's first factory inspectors, also noted the illnesses and risks of asbestos among the workers. As such, factories were made to include ventilation and exhaust systems by the 1930s. It would not be long after the discovery and naming of asbestosis that another issue would be found. In 1934, researchers discovered links between asbestos and cancer. Symptoms would be what you'd expect with lung damage, so shortness of breath, fatigue, coughing, pain in the chest, side, and back, those sorts of things. Warnings of this complication, however, would not be public until 1942.
Wow.
And a year later, the first tumor associated with the mineral was reported in Germany. The first reported case of mesothelioma would be diagnosed in 1953, and a few years later, asbestos would be known as a carcinogen.
Yeah.
The amphibole asbestos.
In the meninging.
The amphibole asbestos have also been shown to cause some autoimmune disorders, along with lung cancer, mesothelioma, and asbestosis. So, yeah.
There are still mesothelioma class action lawsuit commercials all over midday TV.
I remember being a kid and watching like the stupidest shows on Channel 11. I don't know.
Fox. That was Fox. That was the Fox affiliate. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was ages ago.
Yes, I remember.
Because like they were the ones that had the Saturday morning cartoons. That's like right. X-Men and stuff.
Because they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, they had the best cartoons on Saturdays. Of course, on the weekdays they had like Jerry Springer and Maury and stupid crap like that. But like in between any show they would have big old word mesothelioma, and as a kid you're like, I have no idea what that is.
Yep.
But it was always like, call this lawyer now. One call, that's all. That's one commercial we have here. But he does car wrecks mostly. So, and he's still around. Yeah. So as has been done with other money-making toxins, those financially involved with these companies or factories would go on to deny any such risks. Sound familiar?
Of course.
Even going so far as to keep research reports from the public as much as possible so that they succeeded to promote the production and use of asbestos in industrial building materials through the 1960s.
She keeps mouthing to me, shut up, because her stomach is still growling. I'm sorry. Well, we need to get you food straight away after this.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, they wouldn't promote the production and use, or they wouldn't. Anyway, moving on. Lawsuits began being filed in the 1970s, as one can imagine. So the companies began placing warnings and regulations on the products. The U.S. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, enacted the Clean Air Act in 1970, and asbestos was listed as a pollutant at that point. The Toxic Substances Control Act came about in 1976, which put forth regulations on the production, use, and disposal of asbestos, and later that also included special regulations for schools. Now, asbestos mining in America ended in 2002.
Wow.
So, not really that long ago.
Yeah.
Though imports of the stuff were still allowed at that point. A very recent ban on crystallite asbestos in March of 2024 will hopefully stop this allowance of imported asbestos
This year.
Yeah.
So you remember, we both graduated from the same public university. The group of buildings in the middle of the campus that's gone now
Washington Hall.
That's right.
They had to refurbish it and stuff.
That's right. They did asbestos removal to all of those because they were built way before the mid 70s when regulations actually started coming out.
I took math in some of those buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, thanks, guys. I mean, we should get our money back. I'm just saying.
We are entitled to compensation. Just kidding.
I think they'll give us nothing.
No.
But yeah, mining in Canada ceased in 2012. There were mines in other places as well, of course, including throughout Europe. Cyprus was the largest in Europe, I think. India, Australia, parts of South Africa, and others. Buildings that were built before 1980 likely include or have included asbestos.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's a lot of buildings that are still around that were built before 1980.
Yep.
Now, 225,000 people still die every year from asbestos-related diseases.
Wow. Worldwide, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is a latent sort of thing, often taking up to like 20 to 50 years, like I said before, to show those effects. Unfortunately, some developing countries still mine and use asbestos in their building materials. In fact, the top producer in 2020 was Russia with a solid 790,000 tons produced. Other countries producing asbestos for commercial uses include Kazakhstan, China, Brazil, and Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Approximately 3,000 new cases of mesothelioma are diagnosed every year in America, and 2,500 deaths occur every year in America from mesothelioma.
Mm-hmm.
Lifespans after diagnosis vary, but the average is around 18 to 31 months with treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, worldwide, there were 26,278 deaths in 2020 of mesothelioma.
Wow.
Many of the mines, of course, had mining towns. And I want to talk about one in particular that is still was until recently somewhat inhabited.
Oh.
So
I want to go look it up.
So Whitnum is a town, or was a town, I should say, in Western Australia that started as a mining operation for blue asbestos in the 1930s.
Wow.
There was the Yampier Gorge and the Whitnum Gorge. I don't know why I'm saying gorge. Gorge.
That's soft G.
I'm telling you.
Just soothing us all to sleep on a Friday morning.
Well, technically they'll be listening to this on a Saturday morning.
Now, the gorge.
My voice.
It's an ASMR stream all of a sudden.
My voice is like, had it. Anyway.
And now, the gorge.
Before this, the Aboriginal Banjima peoples, I think it's Banjima, lived there and have native title to the area. In 1947, a company town was built, and the census in 1961 counted 881 people living there, though at one point there were more than 20,000 residents.
Mm-hmm.
So the mine was shut down in 1966 because of the understanding of health risks and lower profitability of the asbestos.
Yeah.
On January 28th, 2008.
It's our anniversary.
It is. You're right. It is. The Department of Environment and Conservation classified Whitnum as a contaminated site under the Contaminated Sites Act of 2003.
Is that a piece of Australian legislation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The contamination site was basically 120,000 acres, making it the largest contamination zone in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yo.
So, pretty big.
That is a big chunk of land.
Yeah. Because of existing health risks due to asbestos contamination in the soil and elsewhere, the whole town was officially abolished in June of 2007. So they would receive no government services. The roads were closed. They removed the town from like maps, and they removed signs leading to it and all that.
Wow.
Like, I think even the asbestos was even in, like, mixed in with the asphalt, like, on the roads, and
Yeah.
it was everywhere. So, like,
Wow.
runways for airplanes, things like that. However, there were some that did not want to leave. Even after it became a ghost town, 3 residents refused to leave. Lorraine Thomas, Mario Hartman, and Peter Hayward defied the government to stay even when their electricity was cut and they were offered payment for their homes.
Peter, you gotta go. Come on, Peter.
Not Neil. Not Neil the Seal.
Someone lives here, mate.
Oh my gosh. They saw no risk whatsoever.
There's bloody asbestos in the asphalt, mate.
Neil don't care. Neil just wants to eat cones. If you don't know who Neil the Seal is, go on
Oh my
TikTok
God.
and find
Just
him.
look up Neil the Seal, bro.
He's my hero. So, yeah, they saw no risk whatsoever, even though researchers who visited there were in like full hazmat attire. So you're just like walking out, watering your plants, and here comes somebody in full hazmat attire. Like, morning.
G'day.
Like, you know, feels like a Fallout episode or something.
Oh my
right?
God.
Just walking around. I've only seen like 1 or 2 episodes of
Dude,
that show. So.
It's so good. The Fallout series on Amazon, forget about it. It's so good.
Now, in an interview done with, wow, my voice was almost done right
With
there.
your larynx.
In an interview done with Mrs. Thomas by the Daily Mail in 2016, she stated that she grew her own vegetables and didn't want to leave and would not be forced to leave. Remember, there's like asbestos in the soil too. So
I am shook.
she also stated that she did not get on well with the other 2 remaining residents. Like, I mean, what do you say to that?
Rebecca, imagine being
I'm not
so
leaving, but I can't stand those 2.
imagine being so disagreeable that the only 2 people that could help you in an emergency won't talk to you.
Yeah.
Man, what
I mean,
what a hot take.
Yeah.
What's that about asbestos? Right. Well, I can't stand these 2 buggers.
Well, as for those 2 men, they said one
We
son.
can't stand there either.
Yeah, I mean, probably. They said they were content to stay because there were no other people. Which, you know what? I feel that.
You were like, that sounds fine.
That's. I mean, I don't want to be around asbestos either, but you know.
Just like she had to mention.
I guess.
I don't get along with those 2.
Like, I want to know what happened. I want to know like stories. But here we are.
Jesus Christ! Like, if you sprain your ankle, or something, if you get sick and you can't water your plants, that's just so great. I love that. Oh,
I think like the nearest, they mentioned like the nearest place to buy food or groceries would be like over 120 miles away too. So I can imagine how far a hospital might be.
how did they survive?
They don't have electricity, but they had generators. I think that they were using at that point.
But you got to buy fuel.
They just didn't want to leave. I think part of it.
Impressive.
I think part of it was just they were being stubborn and they didn't want to be told what to do. You know. Which, I mean, I get it. I don't like being told what to do either, but I mean, it just feels kind of ridiculous.
It's like
you want to pay me money to get out of this dangerous place, which they didn't believe it was dangerous, and away from these 2 people that I don't like. I mean, I'd take it. You know, I'd be like, sure, I'll get out of here. There's plenty of other places for me to go where there aren't that many people.
It's Australia, bro.
So
there's plenty of wilderness for you to wither away in solitude.
Or just get bit by something and die.
Oh. That's
Come to
my
Australia
God, that's
and
hysterical.
die.
I just love that she felt enough motivation to mention that.
Yeah.
Officially.
Don't
also,
like them.
For the record,
they're probably going to read this.
Screw those 2 guys.
Don't like them. Can't stand them.
That's just hysterical.
Anyway, I should mention, though, that the last of them, who was Lorraine, who was 80 at the time, was evicted in 2022.
Christ.
They had to bring people to like lead her out.
Oh.
So there's that.
I mean, those are the patients I see every day. I shouldn't be super shocked.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is still a thing, but some people were visiting the area as recently as 2018 as a form of extreme tourism. It is supposed to be closed to the public now, though, and I think a bushfire destroyed a good bit of it before Some of the buildings were demolished later, so there's not much to see even if you were to go.
Wow.
Anyway.
I actually had a friend, Tony, from back in the day. His dad, he might be retired at this point. They ran a paint and body shop. A bad storm came through and really damaged the roof super bad. Tons of rain, tons of wind. Insurance had to come through, inspect everything and, get an estimate to repair everything. The roof was full of asbestos. Yeah. And because it rained, because it was a rainstorm, it pooled all of the asbestos in puddles on the ground instead of leaving it airborne.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. But it's easier to
Jumping
clean up.
Up and down in muddy puddles, splish, splish, splash, splish, splash.
But it was actually providential because they didn't have to do the typical, hazmat cleanup because it was in a solution form. It was combined with water, so it was all on the ground, which was actually way easier to clean up. So anyway,
that's interesting.
Fun fact.
All right. Oh yeah, and about extreme tourism, I feel like most days going to my backyard, I would consider that extreme tourism. Right. Like there are people out there though that go to crazy places. Ugh. And like just or they'll like sneak into places that I'm pretty sure are illegal to go into, but hey. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Now I also want to mention, and there's a trigger warning here, we're going to be discussing a tiny bit of the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Not going into detail, I'm just mentioning a side note of something that happened along with that. Mm-hmm. But asbestos was actually used in the construction of the two towers in the 60s and 70s. Basically to make the beams stronger and more heat and fire resistant. But when the towers collapsed, it sent about 2,000 tons of asbestos into the air. An estimated 410,000 to 525,000 people were exposed, including more than 90,000 of the workers that were there for rescue, recovery, and cleanup.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I did not think about that.
Now, by 2016, at least 352 people have been diagnosed with asbestosis, 444 people with pulmonary fibrosis. Cancer rates doubled in the area, and 70% of recovery personnel have had lung problems, including what has been termed World Trade Center cough syndrome.
You're joking.
No, which involves like chronic sinusitis, like sinus issues, chronic bronchitis, and asthma.
Oh, wow.
More than 63,000 have been diagnosed with a 9/11 health-related or related health conditions. Mm-hmm. And nearly 21,000 of those were cancer. And these were not just lung cancer, but also like esophageal cancer, those kinds of things too. Mm-hmm. Also COPD, sleep apnea, PTSD, of course, musculoskeletal syndromes, and sarcoidosis were on the rise. Now, rising cases of mesothelioma are expected eventually because that actually takes longer to...
That's right. Yeah. There's an incubation period, so to speak. I never considered... I don't even know practically how you even do asbestos cleanup on a skyscraper that's 100 stories tall.
Well, I mean, I guess they kept it intact, they weren't going to be worried about it. Yeah. Wow. It's the dust really that gets into the lungs
that's
and stuff,
right. So. I mean, I remember clearly from all the footage and photos.
Oh yeah, it was everywhere.
Event, the absolute... It looked like it snowed.
It was chaos. Yeah. It was horrifying.
Yes, it was like a movie.
But yeah, so there's still people suffering from that.
Wow.
But yeah, that is asbestos. Mm-hmm. I also want to talk about another. This is a gas, carbon monoxide.
Okay.
Because I feel like we haven't talked about carbon monoxide.
Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna have to go ahead and dip out of this episode. I got to get on to work. But my lovely and talented and intelligent co-host Rebecca is going to take y'all the rest of the way. Okay.
I'm getting donuts.
And for the record, I don't like those two.
Oh my God.
I just love that so much. Okay.
I'm just going to talk to you like you're here, even though you're not.
I mean, that would be an amazing a format for the
Just
rest of the episode.
leave some room for like silence. Like, okay, cool.
I'll just text throughout the workday. I'll just text you reactions, audio clips of my reactions. Oh, wow. Incredible. You're so good looking.
No way. Okay. I literally was like, what? No. Okay. Okay. Carbon monoxide. This is a colorless, odorless gas that is toxic and occurs as a byproduct and is produced through industrial processes. Carbon monoxide is the most common fatal air poisoning in many countries. Even acute exposure is enough of enough carbon monoxide can cause lasting neurological damage. Severe cases often lead to losing consciousness, coma, and death. Now, chronic exposure to low amounts can cause lethargy, so you're just really tired, headaches, nausea, flu-like symptoms, cardiovascular problems, and also neuropsychological problems. I've actually heard of people seeing and hearing things they think are paranormal, like ghosts and shadows and voices and such, and it actually turned out they were suffering from chronic carbon monoxide poisoning. So I'm not saying that everyone who experiences the paranormal has carbon monoxide poisoning. I'm just saying that there has been incidences of that. Now, it is a common outdoor air pollutant as well, as it is a byproduct of exhaust fumes from internal combustion engines. So, car exhaust, things like that. Outdoor burning using coal, wood, or gases, and also forest fires. You could actually observe large amounts of these fumes from space if there is, say, a large forest fire or high air pollution in a city. So basically, it is a byproduct of burning of fossil fuels of some sort. It is also a hazard in mining, as sometimes engines are used, but also through the natural oxidation of coal that can be in mines. Here it is known as the silent killer or white damp. And I'm sure you've heard of the whole canary in the coal mine thing, where they would, release canaries, and if the canary, survived, then it was safe. But if they died, then there was probably a silent killer. Most deaths from carbon monoxide are from indoor air pollution caused by fuel burning, such as burning wood, oil, natural gas, coal, those kinds of things. So like stoves, heating systems, and blocked flues. So exhaust has like nowhere to escape, basically. A lot also depends on where you may live. In developed countries, common causes are fuel-burning appliances being installed incorrectly or being faulty or not being maintained or used properly. In underdeveloped countries, the cause is burning using cheaply made and thus poorly made fuels, and also cigarette smoke in small, enclosed spaces. You may have even heard of deaths from people purposely inhaling car exhaust in the garage after turning their cars on in an enclosed space. That has been a method that people have used to die by suicide, or people accidentally or purposely leaving the gas on the stove on. These would be deaths from carbon monoxide poisoning. I think we mentioned a case where Violet, the girl that killed her parents or tried to kill her parents, she killed her father with Veronal. She had turned the stove on to make it look like they had tried to die by suicide using the gases from the stove. Natural gas does not contain carbon monoxide. It does contain methane mostly, with traces of other gases, including CO2, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's carbon dioxide. But carbon monoxide can be produced if there is not enough oxygen where natural gas is being burned, such as in malfunctioning gas appliances. So basically, when the gas is left on, carbon monoxide can be produced to deadly effects because of the enclosed space and the inability of the fuel to burn properly or completely. Natural gas itself can be dangerous because of its flammability. Mercaptan is actually added now to natural gas so that it can be more easily detected. Mercaptan has a strong sulfur-like smell, so it's likened to rotten eggs or like the smell that a skunk would have after spraying. Natural gas was odorized beginning in 1937 after a gas leak in a Texas school ignited. It killed over 200 children. So they started odorizing the gas. Carbon monoxide has been known about for a long time. It is likely that early peoples learned that burning fires in living spaces with no place for the smoke to go was a bad idea. Also, the development of metallurgy and smelting likely introduced large amounts of carbon monoxide around people. So basically using heat to purify metals from ores, things like that. It was Aristotle who lived around 384 to 322 BC, who first recorded that burning coal produced toxic fumes. Galen, the well-known Greek physician from 129 to 199 AD, he believed there was some change in the air that was dangerous if inhaled upon burning coal or other similar fuels. German chemist Georg Ernst Stahl is credited for the term carbonari halitus. And I know that sounds like carbonara. It is. We're not talking about pasta, although I wish we were, because that sounds amazing. Carbonari halitus means carbonic vapors. And he was referring to the carbon monoxide that was there and called it toxic in 1697. Friedrich Hoffmann was a German physician and chemist who was super into prescribing mineral waters because of his studies in the compositions of their healing properties of the nearby springs. He is actually known for being the first to study carbon monoxide poisoning as a result of burning charcoal. It turns out there was this story going around that there were some treasure seekers that had died of paranormal circumstances. And he wrote his hypothesis of basically it was carbon monoxide that strangled them, not ghosts. His words, not mine. But yeah, that they were overcome by carbon monoxide. Joseph Priestley, an English chemist, was the first to synthesize carbon monoxide in a lab in 1772. Carl Wilhelm Scheele also isolated carbon monoxide from charcoal a year later and surmised it was the cause of toxicity in the fumes. It would later be identified as a compound containing carbon and oxygen by William Cruikshank in 1800. Fun name. Just before and after this, others were discovering that carbon monoxide brightened the blood and acted as an antagonist to oxygen in blood. Fun fact, carbon monoxide is often used in meat packing to keep the meat looking red and healthy. So next time you go to the grocery store and you're looking at meat, the reason why the meat looks so nice and red, probably carbon monoxide. That should help you understand, though, why carbon monoxide is toxic. It basically replaces the oxygen in your blood by binding to the hemoglobin and suffocates you. And it suffocates you from the inside out. It actually binds more quickly to hemoglobin than oxygen does. And victims of poisoning have this cherry red pigment to the skin because of the amount of carboxyhemoglobin in the blood. So they're almost like this cherry or pink color. Treatment involves being removed from the toxic environment and given oxygen, either via face mask, mechanical ventilation, or a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, depending on the severity of the exposure. Now, today we have carbon monoxide detectors, thankfully. These were first developed in the 1920s. They should be maintained properly so that they can work, especially if you have gas appliances in the home. We also have catalytic converters invented by French mechanical engineer Eugene Houdry in 1952. We have these on cars to help reduce emissions of such gases as carbon monoxide from the exhaust. And today there are still about 400 accidental carbon monoxide deaths in the U.S. every year, not due to fires, mind you. About 100,000 emergency room visits due to carbon monoxide exposure every year, and about 140,000 hospitalized for carbon monoxide poisoning every year. You may have also read about the use of illuminating gas in the past. You ever see those fun lights that they're like little lanterns where they're being lit by somebody in old movies? Well, these were gas lit lights, basically. So before we had electricity for lighting, there was gas lighting, fueled by illuminating gas. And the first thing I also thought of when I was researching this was that episode of Doctor Who. I want to say it was the Ninth Doctor. And yeah, the Ninth Doctor, and he was with Rose, and they went to this funeral home or this funeral parlor back in the day. And I think there was Charles Dickens was there somehow. And yeah, so obviously back in time at this funeral parlor, and there were like these little ghosts like aliens that were living in the gas lamps and stuff. Anyway, first thing I thought of because of the whole gaslighting thing. But also gaslighting, I'm not talking about the manipulative term, I'm talking about gaslighting. Anyway, I'm about to go down a whole different tangent of information, so let's get back to carbon monoxide. Gas leaks from faulty lighting fixtures also caused carbon monoxide poisoning. Some places still have outdoor gas lighting for that vintage feel. And those, it's usually not a big deal. They're outdoors. There have been many accidental deaths, deaths by suicide, and even murders via carbon monoxide. Now, many true crime fans out there are going to know about H.H. Holmes, who is credited as being America's first serial killer. And I'm going to talk about him for a moment. I'm not going to give every detail because I feel like that would take us hours, to be honest. Maybe in a future, Patreon episode, if we ever do it for true crime, we'll go about doing a story on H.H. Holmes. But for now, I'm going to give you the basics and why I'm mentioning him alongside carbon monoxide. His real name actually was Herman Webster Mudgett. He changed his name likely to escape, a previous crime, as he was a professional fraudster. And it's believed he used Holmes because, well, he liked Sherlock Holmes, ironically. He was a doctor that started his way in crime with conning others, stealing dead bodies, and insurance fraud. He eventually convinced this widow to sell him her late husband's drugstore in Chicago, where they had been living above. He later killed her and then used the lot across the street to build this sort of murder castle that he operated as a hotel of sorts, especially during the 1893 World's Fair that was being held in Chicago. The layout of the building was really weird, with these maze-like hallways and rooms. Kind of reminds me of like the Winchester estate. Of course, she was doing like paranormal stuff with that, but this was specifically built for murder. And the people he had working for him building this, he would like make sure none of them stayed long enough to know the whole layout of the place. I guess he didn't want people to get suspicious while they were building it. But it is a suspicious building. I mean, there were soundproof rooms, trap doors, false floors, sliding walls, airtight doors. There were stairways that led to nowhere. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Now, he would basically lure people to stay at this hotel, and he would tell them to stay. They needed life insurance policies, and he would pay for it for them so long as he was the beneficiary. I feel like that is a huge red flag, but maybe that's something that people did back then when they were letting people stay with them. I don't know. But he did that with at least some of them. He would then trap and murder them in various ways. One of the ways that he did this was by putting them in a sort of gas chamber room with one of those airtight doors with a tube expelling illuminating gas. And once his victims were deceased, they were dropped into a basement via a chute. They were then dissected and their skeletons sold to medical schools. He later killed his friend and fraud associate, Benjamin Petitzel, by getting him drunk so that he was unconscious. Then he covered him with benzene and set him on fire, basically. Now, this was after they had constructed this plan to fake Petitzel's death for insurance money. Like, they were supposed to begin this together, and I guess Holmes just decided to cut out anyone else, But this plot was found out. He was arrested soon after in Boston on November 17th, 1894. They also later found 3 of Petitzel's children dead as well. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. And this is when he confessed to 27 other murders and told people about his murder castle back in Chicago. So they didn't know about this yet. The house was investigated, and they put the body count closer to 230 people. They were using like missing persons flyers and all kinds of stuff, and they found that it was probably closer to 230 people. Now, Holmes was hanged on May 7th, 1896 in Philadelphia. His last wishes were to have cement poured into his coffin and then have the top be nailed shut before being buried in a hole 10 feet deep after another layer of cement and sand was added over the coffin. I'm guessing he did this because he did not want his body being looted or dissected like he had done to so many other people. He is buried this way in the Holy Cross Cemetery in, Yeadon, Pennsylvania. His murder castle was sold and was going to be a museum of sorts for his crimes, kind of a crude sort of museum. But it burned down before that ever opened, and now a post office stands there. A quick note, because there are some who believe that H.H. Holmes was also Jack the Ripper, including his great-great-grandson, Jeff Mudgett. While the theory is interesting, the Ripper murders stopped about 6 months before Holmes' murders began, so, the timeline could add up. Their MOs were very different, and their motives were as well. And there's just no conclusive evidence that Holmes even traveled to London. So I think it's unlikely. I don't think that's the case, but there are people who believe that out there. Let's see. I want to talk also about carbon dioxide. Since if we're going to talk about carbon monoxide, I feel like we shouldn't leave out carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a natural gas, unlike carbon monoxide, which can be a natural byproduct. CO2 is a natural gas. Deaths from CO2 are much, much more rare than those from carbon monoxide. While 35 parts per million of carbon monoxide is life-threatening, it takes 30,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide to reach that level of risk. Carbon dioxide is used in the carbonation of certain drinks, and is found in greenhouse gases to encourage plant growth, amongst other uses. Carbon dioxide poisoning occurs when the lungs cannot get enough oxygen and are instead breathing in carbon dioxide that the lungs would normally expel, basically. This leads to suffocation and death. One thing about H.H. Holmes that I did not mention was that some of his victims were shut inside of a bank vault near his office and left to suffocate. That is essentially them dying of CO2 poisoning. They would have died of CO2 poisoning before they died of lack of oxygen. Symptoms of poisoning are similar to carbon monoxide poisoning because it leads to suffocation, just in a different way. So you're going to experience dizziness, headaches, fatigue, difficulty breathing, and nausea before going unconscious. And I'm sure we all know about carbon dioxide being a greenhouse gas as well. While carbon dioxide is naturally occurring in our atmosphere and is not a toxin in small amounts, enough carbon dioxide emissions can cause an overall greenhouse effect for the planet. So if you've ever been in a greenhouse, you know the difference in the temperature. Carbon dioxide essentially traps heat in the atmosphere and basically changes the ecology of the planet that way. So you've got the global warming, the climate change ensuing. I've also, and now, this isn't the first time the planet has gone through climate change. Now, with us helping it along, that doesn't help. but it has been through climate change because of geological events as well, like a lot of volcanic activity spewing all these gases into the atmosphere. We just happen to be helping it along this time. So, no fun. I've also heard that carbon dioxide dissolving during pressure changes while diving is involved with decompression sickness or the bends. I'm no diver, so I'm not sure. I'd always heard that dissolving nitrogen in the blood was the main issue, but maybe both happen. So, also, those caught in an avalanche are at risk of dying from CO2 poisoning before running out of oxygen because they're in that small space. They're likely breathing in the carbon dioxide that they're breathing out. So, I've read some reports of people being injured or dying because they suffocated in dry ice freezers, because dry ice is basically solid carbon dioxide, or because of leaks in lines leading to taps. Now, there's a story of Todd Keeling, who was 48. He actually died in June of 2018 while working overnight trying to install a beer tap mechanism in the walk-in freezer at the SunTrust Park in Atlanta, Georgia. It's too bad Adam's not here right now because he loves the Braves, and that's where they play. Apparently, Keeling became trapped in the freezer, and there were lines that were leaking CO2. The mechanism for the door also malfunctioned, leaving him trapped, and he suffocated while in there. He was found by a coworker before the next day's game. Both the door issue and the leaks were known about beforehand, so you can imagine the lawsuit that came after that. There was another death in 2018 at the Smoky Mountain Opry in Pigeon Forge when a man, Josh Ellis, he was 38, walked into a room filled with carbon dioxide. Apparently, the valve for carbon dioxide used for a smoke effect was left on. He fell into a coma and died soon after. So deaths are rarer but have occurred. Now, one story I really wanted to share involving carbon dioxide is that of Lake Nyos in Cameroon in Africa. On August 21st, 1986, something, either a landslide, volcanic activity within the lake, or an earthquake, caused something known as a limnic eruption. This is a rare disaster, also known as lake overturn, which causes a big gas cloud to emerge from the water and surround the area around it, asphyxiating anything that breathes. So it's a giant cloud of carbon dioxide gas that just comes out from the lake. So it's like the dissolved CO2 rises up, gets into the air, creates this cloud, and just asphyxiates anything in the area. Now, my guess is that it was volcanic activity because this freshwater lake sat in the caldera of an old volcano, but a landslide could have also caused the rush of the dissolved carbon dioxide upwards. Some towns a bit further away did recall hearing something that sounded like thunder, but there was no other notification of the event. This huge gas cloud ended up killing approximately 1,746 people in the villages surrounding the lake, as well as around 3,000 cattle and any other birds, insects, or other animals in the area. Research teams noticed that the water had turned a reddish-brown color, likely due to the iron-rich water rising from beneath and being oxidized, and that the lake levels had dropped about a meter. Also, a bunch of trees were knocked down. The eruption of gas led to a wave of water and foam, 82 feet or 25 meters, and it hit one side of the shore. It looked like a bomb had gone off, essentially. Carbon dioxide is 1.5 times the density of air, so it stayed pretty close to the ground, and it moved down into the valleys, hitting the villages of Nyos, Cam, Cha, and Sobum. It traveled as far as 16 miles or 25 kilometers from the lake. There were about 4,000 people who fled, and these suffered respiratory problems, lesions, and even paralysis afterwards. Another incident like this actually happened 2 years earlier on a smaller scale, about 60 miles away at Lake Monoun, where 37 people were killed. Since the disaster at Lake Nyos, researchers have found ways to degas the lake using pipes so that the carbon dioxide saturated water is forced upward, and the gas is basically released in this controlled fashion so that it doesn't build up and basically go boom. Now, several pipes have been installed in both of these lakes with some success, so that's encouraging. With that, I do want to mention how excited I am for Spooky Lake Month coming up. Those of you who know Spooky Lake Month should also be excited because it's almost October. And if you don't know what Spooky Lake Month is, just go type it in to TikTok. There's this creator. I honestly cannot remember her name at the moment, but I will definitely include her TikTok in the show notes because just want to encourage everybody. It's a great time. Spooky Lake Month is amazing, and I can't wait for it. And with that, I guess I'm here by myself ending things again. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend/week, and I will catch you at the next one. Bye!